On this week's Fanco Wrestling Show, I break down exactly what is going to happen at the NCAA Championships with a full preview of brackets and so much more. If you're interested in knowing what is going to happen this year, then let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to the Fanco Wrestling Show for the actual last live show before the NCAA Championships. I'll be breaking down the brackets weight by weight. They are fresh off the press, so you're going to get my full, unfiltered opinions about exactly what I see in the brackets. Plus, I will be breaking down lots of other things tonight, such as the undefeated wrestlers that still remain. There are plenty of them still remaining this season, as well as I will be talking a little bit about the underdog threats to watch at NCAAs. And there's some interesting things because I actually wrote this out before the show started, but now that the brackets are out, some of those threats may change just a bit. I hope that you are strapped down, ready to go for the show tonight, because there's so much to look forward to here. Now, the NCAA Championships will be next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Round 1 starts on Thursday. Round 2 is also on Thursday, and then we get into the quarterfinals, semifinals on Friday, and of course, the finals are on Saturday. I will be attending the NCAA Championships. That's part of the reason why there will be no live show next week, but I still have plenty of great content coming out once I have time to fully analyze these brackets. I cannot wait to cover the event this year. So let's get into these brackets because oh my goodness, they are fresh off the press. The NCAA just did their selection show. So let's bring up these brackets. Starting at 125 pounds, fresh off the press. Spencer Lee, of course, is the number 1 seed, and Sam Latona earned the number 2 seed here. And while I'm going through this is a little bit of more of a laid-back show compared to in the past weeks, just because I have the full brackets up, full unfiltered opinion about these brackets. So if you are loving these, make sure you leave a comment down below. Especially the number 1 seed, Sam Latona of Virginia Tech, the number 2 seed. Then we got Brandon Courtney as number 3 seed and Drew Hildebrand as the number 4 seed. So some interesting matchups, I guess, to look out for here. Spencer Lee, Spencer Lee is the best wrestler at this tournament. I know that there's some back and forth whether whether Gable's the best wrestler or whether Spencer's the best wrestler. We'll see how they both perform this weekend, but Spencer's just looking dominant coming into this weekend. Devin Schroeder, unfortunately, just can't get past Spencer Lee, and if he does end up making the quarterfinals, he will have Spencer, but I wouldn't look past Rayvon Foley in that Thursday night session. We also have Eric Barnett, who didn't have the best Big Tens, but has actually had a solid season. He's on the bottom half of the bracket, is Eric Barnett, the number 19 seed here. And Brandon Courtney, he could run into him in the quarterfinals. That should be an interesting one. But I also want to look out for this because on that same kind of section of the bracket, on that same quarter, you have Dylan Ragusin, who's the number 11 seed of Michigan, who in the second round could be taking on either Gage Curry, who's from America and somebody not to overlook, and Jacob Camacho of NC State. A Dylan Ragusin going up against Jacob Camacho, wow, that is a match that I would live for it. And if Camacho ends up just winning out, the other interesting thing here is if he does make the semis, which that won't be an easy task. Like I just said, he's going to have to get past Gage Curry, Dylan Ragusin, a Barnett, or a Brandon Courtney. He would have actually in the semis potentially Sam Latona, who these guys have wrestled all year so far in big pressure situations. So I'm interested to see how that ends up stacking up. I think Latona actually has a pretty nice path into the semis, but one interesting first-round matchup here I do want to talk about as well is Robbie Howard of Penn State wrestling Malik Heinzelman of Ohio State in the first round. This isn't necessarily a great matchup for Penn State fans because Malik Heinzelman has been really, honestly, on fire this year. He's just been looking like one of my favorite wrestlers to watch at the 125-pound weight class. And there are plenty of great guys to watch here. And actually, interestingly enough, 125 is the weight with the most undefeated wrestlers And I'll get to the most undefeated wrestlers actually in another segment, but just look out for that, because at the end of the day, there's going to be one undefeated wrestler that finishes the tournament at 125 pounds. Let's move on to 133. Dayton Fix gets the number 1 seed, and Rowan Bravo Young number 2. At number 3 is Corbin Myers, and Austin DeSanto ends up with the number 4 seed. I'll be honest, this was kind of surprising to me. Myers, although he is undefeated this year, undefeated conference champion, is Corbin Myers at 133, 8-0 of Virginia Tech. Austin DeSanto's only lost to the number 2 seed, and he's performed well at nationals before, so I'm surprised, but it's not the worst thing for an Austin DeSanto. He's still going to have a tough route. Now, first match, he actually has Paul Bianchi of Little Rock, and this is Little Rock's first ever national qualifier. Awesome that it's their first ever national qualifier. The video came out on their social media. If you haven't seen that, that's a video that I highly recommend watching. It was just full of such excitement and joy and raw emotion from that program. Also on this side, in this little quarter of the bracket, Mickey Phillippi, who is a wrestler from Pitt, I'd be looking out for, 8-1 this season, could be running into Austin DeSanto in the quarterfinals. These two guys have not wrestled in college yet, but if Phillippi does win, which he's a stingy wrestler, tough to score on, and also does a lot of scoring himself, he would be running into Dayton Fix in the semis. And if Phillippi's able to get over Austin DeSanto, that's not a bad draw, because of the fact that Phillippi actually beat Dayton Fix, and was the only current college wrestler to have beat Dayton Fix. The only other guy is Nick Soriano, who's not in college right now, obviously. Or at least he's not wrestling this season, I should say. So Dayton Fix, you could see DeSanto or Phillippi in the semis there. On the bottom half with Corbin Myers, has a decent little route to the semifinals and could be going up against Rowan Bravo Young. Rowan Bravo Young honestly is set up probably the best here out of any of these guys, out of any of these seeds, just with his route to the finals. I honestly don't see Rowan Bravo Young having a problem with anybody here. He looked great at the Big Tens. The other thing I do want to say, though, is, he wrestled Austin DeSanto in the Big Ten finals. He looked good there, but the unfortunate thing was DeSanto actually had some sort of finger injury. I hope that kind of heals up and he gets better, because I don't know how much it affected him, but it did affect him a little bit. As we move on to 141 pounds, Jaden Ironman, with winning the Big Ten championships, earned the number 1 seed. Number 2 is Nick Lee. So you'll see a lot of these number 1 and number 2 seeds are actually Big Ten guys from winning the Big Tens or making the Big Ten finals and having great undefeated seasons, but not at every single weight. We'll see that in a little bit, but with these two guys making the Big Ten finals, we could see them definitely making the NCAA finals, but they'll have some tough routes ahead of them. Jaden Ironman is on a relatively tough side. Ironman is looking good. I know that I ran into some controversy when I said he had a good match against Nick Lee, but he was kind of stalling a bit, and I know that was a little bit controversial, but he did receive 2 stalling calls in the Big Ten finals in the last 2 periods, but whatever. That's kind of how Ironman wrestles. He does something awesome. Love watching him wrestle, but Tariq Wilson got the number 4 seed here at 141 pounds. And this is another interesting little quarter of the bracket, because Dom Demas, the number 5 seed of Oklahoma, won his conference championships. He's 12-1. He could be going up against Real Woods and Grant Willits. Now, Willits and Woods actually wrestled in their conference in the Pac-12 when Woods lost. So that's a first-round matchup they have again. Whoever wins that will be going up against Dom Demas, the number 5 seed, and whoever wins that will make it to the quarterfinals, likely against a Tariq Wilson, who's looking the best he's ever looked. Now, one of the first NCAA championships I went to, Tariq was just looking on fire. He was just crushing it that year, and he's been looking like the same he was that a couple years ago at the ACC championship. So let's see if that continues. If he does wrestle Demas, let's just say Demas ends up winning out that little quarter of the bracket, ends up making it to the semifinals, him and Ironman is not a bad matchup at all. These two guys wrestle very stingily. They don't score a crazy ton of points, and they actually wrestled in the NCAA championships a couple of years ago. Ironman won that match, but I'd be interested to see how that goes down again. On the bottom half of the bracket, Sebastian Rivera has a pretty nice route to the semis against Nick Lee, who also has a similar solid route. I'd be looking out for Ian Parker. If you're Nick Lee, look out for an Ian Parker, the number 7 seed. If you're Sebastian Rivera, Dylan Millows is a tough first match, but even a Cody Tribus, who's undefeated from Navy, is going to be a tough round if he makes the quarters. But Sebastian, I'm really looking forward to the Rivera and Nick Lee match again in the semifinals, to seeing how that would go this time around. Between, everybody wanted to see Ironman, Sebastian Rivera, and Nick Lee. That was honestly my most anticipated matchup at the Big Ten Championships, just because they hadn't wrestled this year yet. All solid, great wrestlers. And I was honestly hoping that I was mostly hoping that Nick Lee won the Big Tens, just so that we could see an Ironman and Sebastian Rivera semifinal at the NCAAs, just based on how seeds would go, but we're maybe never going to get that match now. At 149, and I'm talking a little bit here, but some of the upper weights, some of these seeds, and I just briefly looked at them. Briefly. I'm really going over them with you here now, but briefly, the upper weights are just crazy, some of the seeds, and there are some that I just disagree with. There's nothing here that I really disagree with that much. Sammy Sasso got the number 1 seed. Austin O'Connor, the number 2 seed. Brock Muller, undefeated. Best record out of anybody this year, 17-0, the number 3 seed. Buchanan, 16-1, the number 4 seed. The one thing I want to point out here is, which is going to be a crazy pigtail, well, not pigtail, but first-round match, I should say, if Andrew Alvarez wins his pigtail, which I expect him to. He didn't wrestle in his conference. He injury defaulted out. But he's somebody who he was one of my most anticipated matches of the conference weekend. But now, because he didn't wrestle, he's going to be wrestling potentially first round against Sammy Sasso. The crazy thing, this kind of first round matchup, not to the same extent, but kind of reminds me of who was it, JoJo Smith a couple years ago wrestling against Alex Marinelli in the first round because he had the pigtail. And that match, that almost did not go in Alex Marinelli's favor. It almost didn't. And so we'll see what happens here with Sammy Sasso. Sasso has been commanding on the mat this year. I expect him to continue that. He is kind of a rough path as a number 1 seed. I would not overlook Yaya Thomas or Jaden Abbas on his side as well. Ridge Lovett is on Sammy Sasso's side. They would meet in the semifinals, but Lovett has a lot to get over here. First, Peyton Omania is somebody who has just stunned in a couple different ways this season. Watch out for that lefty headlock, Ridge Lovett. I'd be looking out for that. Max Murin and Ridge Lovett could be a second-round match. Could be a Thursday night match. Wow. Can you believe? If you're an Iowa fan, I'd be a little bit nervous after what happened at Big Tens with Murin going 0-2. It's great that he got the bid, but Murin's got to step up his game. He's got to step it up here in order to beat a Ridge Lovett. Mitch Moore and Josh Heil, that should be a really fun first-round matchup here on this quarter. It honestly seems like, as I'm looking at these brackets right now, the number 5, number 4, that kind of quarter of the bracket has the best matchups out of any of the brackets so far. But Mitch Moore and Josh Heil should be a great matchup. Boo Llewellyn also on that side. We could see a Lovett and Sasso rematch in the semifinals. On the bottom half of here, Brock Muller looking good on that top half. Bryce Andoni, I'd be looking out for him. Virginia Tech has some decent wins on the year. And on the very bottom, Austin O'Connor still has a tough route out. 149 for these top seeds is not easy. Just with kind of how the year went, some of these guys just took losses that honestly kind of hurt them in the seedings. But Austin O'Connor is going to have to beat, first he has Corey Crook's first match, then potentially Jarrett Deegan or Griffin Perriott in the second round. And then he'll run into like a Jonathan Milner or Mike Van Brill. And we could see a Brock Muller and Austin O'Connor semifinal, which could be exciting. Austin O'Connor, we haven't seen him wrestle a lot of matches this year just because of the shortened schedule. So I'll be looking forward to seeing how he does and how if he can make the NCAA finals. It'd be great for the ACC at 157. So it was, we likely knew that Deacon was going to get the 1 seed, but how was Hidley going to end up? Where was David Carr going to end up? We ended up with Ryan Deacon at the number 1 seed. Hayden Hidley got the number 2 seed, David Carr got number 3, and Jesse De La Vecchia got the number 4. Each of these guys is undefeated. So the top 4 seeds are undefeated, and if it turns out, if each of these guys makes the semis, that would be pretty crazy. The top 4 seeds all make the semis, all undefeated, and only one of them will end up undefeated, but how often does that happen? That the top 4 seeds make the semis? Not always. There's usually one upset in there, 1 or 2 upsets on one of these guys. And some of the things I'd be looking out for here, Franek, number 8 seed, had a good conference tournament. I'd be looking out for him, but I don't know if he's going to be a match for Deacon in the quarters. Connor Brady and Caleb Young is a good first-round match. Now Caleb Young looked good at the Big Tens. Be honest with you, look good at the Big Tens, but he could be running into a Brady Berge on Thursday night in the second round. And this is one of those things, Iowa is the dominant favorite here, with Iowa being obviously they have 10 NCAA qualifiers and have the best shot at NCAA trophy with 4 number 1 seeds. But this is an important match. If Caleb Young wins this, Penn State's honestly hopes are going to start dying early on. But if Brady Berge can pull out that win early on, then maybe you see a little bit of change up here. On the bottom half here, let's pull this up. Some interesting matchups here. Ja'Cory Teamer and Ben Barton. I'm really excited to see how that match goes. Just because I just think that'll be a great first round matchup. But Brayton Lee also with those guys on that same little quarter of the bracket, and Brayton Lee will be, he had a good conference tournament, but we'll see how he does here. And then Hayden Hidley, the match that I'm really looking forward to here is in the semis if these guys win out. David Carr and Hayden Hidley. Who do you think will win there? Please, leave a comment right now. Who do you think will win between David Carr and Hayden Hidley? Because whoever wins that and goes up against Deacon, it's just a little triangle with these guys. It's been like that last year. It's been like that at the Senior Nationals. And Deacon is the favorite here in folk style, but we'll see how that goes. At 165, to me, this is the toughest bracket of the tournament. It really is. I said that weeks ago. I started thinking that about a month or 2 ago once we saw how things were playing out. But 165 is going to be one of the toughest weights. And with Alex Marinelli potentially going up against Thomas Bullard or William Fermato in the second round, that's going to be a tough match. And I believe that Bullard actually lost to Fermato. I believe he did actually earlier on in this season. So kind of interesting. I'm really looking forward to. So Luke Weber of North Dakota State and Andrew Sparks of Minnesota will be wrestling first round. Sparks, as a freshman, has kind of impressed me this year so far, more so at the beginning of the year than kind of where he is now. But he's somebody who, if he's in the right mindset, if he's feeling good, could make some noise at nationals. Shane Griffith also on this side of the bracket, and if Shane Griffith and Alex Marinelli meet up again, it's a matchup that people have been dying to see. Who wins, Marinelli or Shane Griffith, if they make the quarterfinals? Now, Zach Hartman got the number 5 seed, and Mekhi Lewis the number 4 seed. So I failed to mention that the top 4 seeds here: Marinelli number 1, Anthony Valencia number 2, Jake Wenzel 3, and Mekhi Lewis is the number 4 seed. Mekhi didn't wrestle at the conference championships. He injury defaulted out, and so Jake Wenzel won the ACC championships. So that's why he didn't get a higher seed, as he's a returning NCAA champion. But it's good. He's got to be happy that he got as high of a seed as he did, is Mekhi Lewis, and he's got to get through some guys, Tanner Schedule, a Jake Keating, or a Zach Hartman. You better believe that's going to be tough. Zach Hartman is somebody who last year he lost to Tanner Schedule. This year he majored him, EIWA champion. Zach Hartman was one of my dark horses at last year's NCAA championship. So just with how much better he's got, we'll see. We'll see if Mackay is back to full Mackay Lewis. We'll see how he does. Now, the thing I want to know is who wins this top half of the bracket? Who makes the finals here? Is it Hartman? Is it Mackay Lewis? Is it Alex Marinelli? And if Marinelli and Mackay meet up again at NCAAs, who wins this time around? Because I believe it's like a one takedown match. So drop a comment. Marinelli or Mackay in the top half. Who's making the finals? And then the bottom half with Wenzel. Now, Garrett Ninehouse is a freshman from my high school, actually, who had a great Big Ten tournament. One of the best Big Ten tournaments for a freshman. Now, okay, maybe not. He didn't make the Big Ten finals, but he placed high. He qualified for nationals as a freshman from Purdue, and very impressive. Going up against Peyton Robb first match, I believe Robb got the better of him at Big Ten, so it's kind of tough first round matchup. But if he makes those adjustments and he comes in hot to Big Tens or to NCAAs, you could see him making a little bit of a run against potentially another Pennsylvania guy in Jake Wenzel. Now, Jake Wenzel has been looking impressive. I mean, he's just commanding on the mat. So commanding on the mat, especially in his match against Mackay Lewis. Cam Amin and Kennedy Monday should be a great first-round matchup here. These two guys, Cam Amin's been looking good this season. Kennedy Monday, not too bad, and he's usually somebody who can pull an upset at these type of events. Kennedy Monday, I'd be looking out for him. And Keegan O'Toole, the Missouri wrestler, who's 13-0 right now, number 6 seed, which is probably where he deserves to be right now, but he hasn't really wrestled anybody this season. So any ranked guys, big ranked guys this season. So we'll see how he's going to end up there, and see maybe he is the tough guy, the tough freshman that can make the NCAA finals this year. 165 is notorious, very notorious for a freshman winning it, an upset win, and maybe Keegan O'Toole is the guy, but he's going to have to get past a couple guys like Ethan Smith and Joe Lee on the bottom half. Ethan Smith and Joe Lee could be meeting in the second round. Joe Lee had a decent Big Tens, but he's going to have to do some more if Penn State wants to do something here. And then Anthony Valencia on the bottom half. Valencia, I believe he's somebody who can make a run and make the semis. I think him and Jake Wenzel would be a great matchup between those two guys. Valencia's just been looking better than he ever has. I mean, major Shane Griffith at Pac-12s? Look out for him at 74. 174. Woo-wee. Okay. Let's talk about this. Michael Kemmer, number 1 seed. Number 2, Demetrius Romero. Lots of controversy here. Lots of controversy about a wrestler who's 16-0 from Utah Valley. Okay. Why does he get the number 2 seed? Maybe I get some of the controversy, but he's undefeated. Conference champion, Demetrius Romero of Utah Valley. Okay, he got the number 2 seed over Carter Starachi, who's the number 3 seed, and Mikey Labriola, who's number 4 seed. And maybe if Labriola would have made the Big Ten finals, then he could have been ranked over Demetrius Romero. But the fact remains, it kind of looks like NCAA's favoring, to some extent, undefeated records over if you took a loss or two. Now, Labriola only has the 1 loss. And Starachi is a freshman who hasn't done anything on the national stage yet. He's a freshman who made the Big Ten finals, but that is the Big Ten. We'll see how he does under the real pressure of the NCAA tournament. Although there will be no public fans, there actually will be fans there. I estimated around 2,000 fans. Yeah, around 2,000 fans is kind of what I figured. Maybe a little bit more, maybe 2,500, depending on some of the tickets. My Patreon members actually got some of that exclusive info, as well as a first glimpse at when all the NCAA rounds will be. Some behind-the-scenes info on what's going down there, because I got some behind-the-scenes info first, and I want to share that with my Patreon members. But Labriola and Kemmer, if these two guys end up making the semifinals, now I'm not overlooking anybody here, okay, but if these two make the semifinals, they had a 1 takedown match last time they wrestled, and I'm not overlooking Labriola, especially if Nebraska gets on a roll with a lot of their guys. Now, some of the guys not to overlook here, Logan Massa of Michigan. Kemmer beat him in the semis of Big Tens, but wouldn't be overlooking him. Daniel Bullard of NC State is on the top quarter with Michael Kemmer. And Donnell Washington, okay, great win to start the year over Carter Srirachi, who is now the number 3 seed. Could he pull something else off? I don't know. On the bottom half here, let's look. Srirachi, the number 3 seed. And in that same half, you have Andrew McNally of Kent State, Austin Murphy of Campbell, and Mason Kaufman. I think this is actually a really interesting quarter of the bracket here. Austin Murphy he's undefeated, 12-0, one of the top 6 best winning records right now in the NCAA this season. Had great wins over Thomas Flitz so far this year of App State and won the conference championship, wrestling against a fellow Ohio wrestler in Andrew McNally. Both these guys, Ohio guys. I'm honestly not sure if they wrestled in high school or not. I'd be interested to know that. But if they had, I mean, you got to believe that there's some interesting matchup there. And you know, that's an upset I'd be looking out for. And making the quarterfinals against the Carter Srirachi, either one of those guys. You know, Srirachi is a freshman. He hasn't been on the big stage yet. But with that being said, Penn State guys do happen to do very well on the big stage as freshmen, but it's a new age. On the very bottom half, Caleb Romero, I'd be looking out for him. Demetrius Romero, could be an interesting Romero quarterfinal there. And we'll see how well Demetrius Romero could earn that second seed there, I think, on the bottom half there. At 184. 184 blows my mind. Look at this bracket here. Okay, so Aaron Brooks, number 1 seed. Okay, I understand that. Even though I think Flow Wrestling had him ranked at like number 5, which no. Trent Hidley got the number 2 seed. And maybe you would say Hidley as the number 1 seed, but the thing is here, Hidley has a loss on the season to Bolin. Now Bolin, okay, I'll get to Bolin in a second, but Lou Dupre got the number 3 seed, undefeated, 7-0. Parker Keckeisen, 15-0, the number 4 seed. Okay, number 5 seed is Hunter Bolin. Are you kidding me? Number 5. Oh, all right. Watch out, because that quarter is about to be crazy. Okay, so let's get into this. I think Aaron Brooks has a pretty nice route to the semifinals. He has wins over a lot of these guys in his half of the bracket already, with Rocky Jordan, Taylor Venge. You know, I think that these are guys that Aaron Brooks could definitely beat again. But you look at this second quarter of the bracket with Hunter Bolin, the number 5 seed, up against Parker Keckeisen. With these two guys, it could be interesting, but Keckeisen has to get away from Sam Colbray first, that's not a gimme match by any means. Chris Weiler is also not another gimme match. Oh my goodness. You know, the Wisconsin wrestler, the transfer to Wisconsin, look out for him. Nelson Brands, he impressed me against Aaron Brooks. He did. Whether that was just because they studied him so much, because of being such a rivalry, because it was Big Ten, I don't know. But Nelson Brands just showed up and he impressed me. He impressed me more at the beginning of the season than kind of where he ended up. But he seems to be back on a roll. So I'd be looking out for the Nelson Brands Hunter Bolin match there. And man, I mean, let me ask you this: between Bolin and Brands, who wins that? And then can Parker Keckeisen make the semifinals here? On the bottom half here, Lou Dupre. I'd also be looking out for Caleb Hopkins and Zach Bronigal. Both these guys, interesting matchups. You know, Bronigal from Big Ten school, from Illinois, had maybe a little bit tougher competition than the SoCon, but Caleb Hopkins, his only loss in the year, he's 11-0, conference champ, only loss in the year is actually to Hunter Bolin, who is the number 5 seed, and he wrestled him 2-0. He rode him out. First match of the year. Watch out for there. Lou Dupre, also want to talk about John Posnanski, who had a solid Big Ten tournament. This may be the time that he really comes alive at the end of the year. And then Trent Hidley. I think Trent Hidley also, similar to the Romarov Young at 33, I think that as a number 2 seed, he has a very solid route to the semis and potentially the finals. If he keeps rocking and rolling like he has the ACC, I think we'll see some great things from him. And at 197, 197, Miles Amin, number 1 seed. Number 2 is Eric Schultz. Number 3, Cordell Norfleet. Number 4, AJ Ferrari. Crazy things going on here for the Big 12, first of all. So, the toughest guys from the Big 12, it seems, are all in the top half of the bracket. None of them are on the bottom half. So, Miles Amin has a... Let's first mention Miles Amin before we get into that Big 12 stuff. Miles Amin has a pretty good route. You know, he may wrestle some close matches like he did in the quarters, like he did in the semis. He had a commanding victory in the finals against Schultz, but I think that Miles Amin finds a way to win those matches. He's one of the strongest wrestlers here at 197. But let's look at the Big 12 things going on here. So Noah Adams and Stephen Buchanan have had some history this year. They've actually had a long history where Adams has got the better of him, but not this year. Buchanan has just had it out for Noah Adams. He has, 3 wins on him this year? All within 2 points, but still all wins. He finds a way to get it done. He has in the match. He has in the Big 12 championships. We'll see if that happens again this year, but I'd be interested to see what happens there. You know, Adams is somebody who is kind of a dark horse. He was undefeated. If he was anywhere else, I'll say this. If he was anywhere else in the bracket, I'd have a little bit more hope for him just because his only losses this year are to the same guy. So, but if he finds a way to get over the hump and beats Buchanan, he'll run into Miles Amin, which will be tough. But on the next quarter of that bracket with Jacob Warner, good Big Ten tournament, but up against Nick Reen in first round matchup, not an easy first round matchup by any means. I also want to discuss Tanner Sloan and AJ Ferrari on the same half of the bracket. Are you kidding me here? Tanner Sloan was undefeated going into Big 12s. AJ Ferrari found a way to beat him and win the Big 12 tournament. He also beat Stephen Buchanan. I'll be honest, I think Ferrari has a pretty good ride to the quarters, and then it gets a little bit tougher from there once he could run into a Jacob Warner and then potentially a Miles Amin. I don't know if he has. We'll see if he has what it takes to get it done. You know, I think that 197 is one of the most exciting ways to see what can happen there because it's open. It's open for discussion. You know, another guy in this bracket, Chris Cober, is the lowest seeded undefeated conference champion. Like, these are the guys you have to be looking out for at nationals. Maybe he doesn't have the highest seed, but he's an undefeated conference champion. Look out for him. I mean, he has J.I.L.O. first round matchup. It's going to be a tough match between those two guys, but, you know, Cober's somebody who can throw down. Aiello, technical wrestler. It should be interesting there. And Bonacorsi also. Bonacorsi, I enjoy watching him wrestle, and he hasn't always shown up on the big stage, but I'd like to see him do it this year. You know, wrestling for Pitt, Bonacorsi, the number 6 seed. It's not going to be easy for him. One guy, the number 3 seed, that I keep seeing comments about, whether it's usually on YouTube, I see comments about Cordell Norfleet is the underrated wrestler. Watch out for Cordell Norfleet. He's underrated. He's coming for you. He's going to beat you this year. He's coming for a national title. Heard it last year, but this year maybe he can find a way to get it done. He's undefeated, 9-0, Pac-12 champ. Does not have an easy route with potentially a Greg Bolzak in the second round. Greg Bolzak, I think actually I had Greg Bolzak winning the what if NCAA bracket that I did last year, if I remember correctly, or at least he made it very far, potentially the finals. So although Bolzak took a rough loss at his conference, look out for him. Look out for him. And on the bottom half, you know, I think Eric Schultz has a pretty good ride, potentially to the quarters at least, but look out for Michael Beard. You know, Michael Beard found a way to take Miles Amin to sudden victory after losing him earlier this season. I think that Michael Beard is somebody who could do well. I think that he could do well here. But he has got a tough Navy guy first round, and those Navy guys have just been so gritty this season and finding ways to get wins. In heavyweight, you may say it's Gable Stevenson's weight, hands down, and you'd probably be right. But who else is here? Jordan Wood, is on his quarter of the bracket, the number 8 seed. That'll be an interesting matchup, maybe. I don't know. Greg Kirkfleet also on that top half of the bracket. And the interesting thing here is, let's say Kirkfleet does get over that Mecca Levy first round, and then he beats Jordan Wood second round, which I'm not saying will happen. I'm saying what if, right? Because it's always fun to say, well, if these two guys happen, then you look at all the stats, you look at the history, and there is history between Gable and Kirkfleet. In high school, they wrestled to a close match, but I'll tell you what, there's a difference between high school and college wrestling, and Gable Stevenson has jumped leaps and bounds. Say what you will about him, he's a dominant wrestler. I don't know if Kirkfleet is on his level yet in college. Maybe in the future he will be, depending on if Gable sticks around in college or goes straight to the WWE. We'll see. But I do want to mention that. Interestingly enough, I may be sitting opposite Gable Stevenson in the first round in Campbell's corner, depending on what happens in that pigtail match. Hopefully Gable's not too mad at me for the video I made the other day. It's all, look, just like to bring up the discussion about Hodge Trophy and all the factors that come into it. I think that he's a great wrestler, but I think that there's a lot to be said, and I hope that he wins and goes through this tournament and at least wins with class. I'll say that. I'll leave it at that. Tony Cascio. So who else is top seeded here? Gable Stevenson, number 1 seed. Mason Paris, number 2 seed. Matt Stencil, undefeated Matt Stencil, got the number 3 seed of Central Michigan. And Colton Schultz got the number 4 seed as the young freshman, the young buck. Got the number 4 seed. Very impressive. Anything can happen there in that little quarter of the bracket with Cassiope, Orndorff from Ohio State, Brian Andrews of Wyoming, who Wyoming's had just had a great year and are just looking to do even better. Colton Schultz, cannot wait to see how he does at NCAAs this year as such a young freshman. So excited to see how he does as Pac-12 champion. And on the bottom half of this bracket, Matt Stencil, as I already mentioned, is undefeated, 10-0 of Central Michigan. Could be going up against Gannon Grumway in the quarterfinals, and I'd be looking out for that match. I think anything can happen there with a tough Gannon Grumway, Iowa State guy. And then on the bottom half, with Mason Paris, I think that he could just be pushing his way through. I would say look out for Hunter Katka, the young freshman, but he does have a tough Carter Isley in the first round matchup. And while he does have that first round matchup, Hunter Katka, if he does win, will have Mason Paris in the second round. And it seems that it's right now, from the wrestling that's been done, it seems like there's a clear difference between the number 1 seed and the number 2 seed. So Gable over Paris, and then even the number 2 seed over the number 3, 4, and 5 seeds. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that this is Gable's bracket to win, but maybe something happens. Maybe he does get a little bit too cocky. I don't think he gets too cocky where he's going to give up any points, but you never know. Who wins the heavyweight match? Can anybody beat Gable Stevenson? We'll see. So thanks for tuning in to this bracket breakdown. I'd really like to know your thoughts. Which bracket are you looking most forward to at the NCAA championships? For me, I have to say it's 165. Cannot wait to see what happens there. So let's get on with the rest of the show. First thing, I want to take a sip of water as we head into this. And listen, if you're enjoying this show so far, if you are loving this bracket breakdown, I want to invite you to do a couple things. First, go ahead and drop a like on this video. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a like, because I have a lot of fun doing this, but I also enjoy discussing it with the fans, and the best way to get it out to more fans is by dropping a like, sharing this video. And if you are like John Smith in the comments, who just dropped 2 mega super chats, I'm just so unbelievably grateful and blessed for Fanco Wrestling supporters, especially like John Smith, who's dropping mega super chats. If you're interested in dropping a super chat, go ahead and drop a super chat right now in the comments to help support this channel as we continue to move forward and making these types of videos for you. Appreciate that as we move into the next topic. So, what is this next topic? there are 5 underdogs that I'm really going to be looking out for at the NCAA championships. 5 underdogs, and that's what makes this a Fanco 5. Fanco 5, let's count them down. So, first of all, what is the underdogs? As we look at the NCAA brackets, which are now out, an underdog is somebody who's obviously not the number 1 seed or even the number 2 seed. And I wouldn't even say it's the number 3 seed. But as we get into the number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seeds, those are the underdogs who people are overlooking. They're not looking out for them to win a national trophy, maybe not even to All-American. But I think that these are some of the most fun wrestlers to watch because anything can happen there. So these are guys who are still, I believe, seeded at least within that top 10. And so that kind of makes them a dark horse or at least an underdog. Because obviously anybody who's not at number 1 is an underdog. But I have some exciting ones. And listen, at first I wanted to say DeSanto was an underdog, but he's not even an underdog to me. I still think that he has a great shot to do well here. Aaron Brooks, I was looking beforehand, okay, just at some of the rankings, and a lot of the rankings he had him at like number 4 or 5, which I thought was absurd, and I was like, well, that still, I still don't see him as an underdog. And of course, he got the number 1 seed, and like Colton Schultz is also potentially an underdog, but not quite as the number 4 seed. So let's talk about this. And before I get this, drop a comment. Who is an underdog at the NCAA championships this year for you? Who is an underdog who you think can win a trophy, but nobody's looking out for? Is it Cordell Norfleet? A lot of guys are looking out for him. Could be an underdog. So first, an honorable mention, a serious honorable mention. This is now in the Fanco 5 list. An honorable mention is Zach Hartman. I didn't initially have him in the top 5, and I'd almost call him like and I'd want to put him in now that I've seen the brackets, because I wrote down these underdogs before the brackets even came out. But let's talk about Zach Hartman, the EIWA champ, undefeated, 10-0, who lost his schedule last year. He lost to him last year in the EIWA. But the thing is, he majored him this year. He majored him at the EIWAs this year. So it shows the jump that he has made as a wrestler. I also want to say that he pinned Kennedy Monday last year, which was like a crazy match, but nobody was talking about it because it wasn't broadcast like anywhere. It wasn't anywhere online. I don't know if Buchanan just didn't tweet about that or what happened, but like, come on. That was a huge match. He also had a close match with Alex Marinelli at Midlands. I remember watching that match. I was actually there for that. A very close match. Now, Marinelli beat him, but Hartman I think he was a freshman at the time, and he still had a close match with him. So look out for him. And a weight as loaded as 165, you better be looking. I mean, anything could happen at 165, especially with these young guys. Number 5 is Andrew Alvarez. Now, initially, I had him in here, but didn't know where he would be seated, of Northern Colorado at 149 pounds. Alvarez, technically he's undefeated this season, but yeah, I guess it matters in your terms of technically. You know, his only loss is an injury default, okay? His only loss is an injury default, so that's why he's out right now. Or excuse me, that's why he had a loss right now. Out of the Big 12 tournament. I was super excited. He was actually one of the wrestlers I was most anticipating to watch at the Big 12 championships, but didn't end up wrestling. He was 24-4 last year, and Boo Llewellyn ended up winning his bracket at 149. As the number 32 seed now, he's going to run into Sammy Sasso first round. Not an easy first round matchup, but if he finds a way to beat Sasso, if he doesn't get cradled by Sasso, maybe he can make a run. Now, this is a match, I've said it already, but it kind of reminds me of a JoJo Smith, Alex Marinelli matchup from a couple years ago, just because Alvarez is such a tough wrestler, and I expected him to do well at Big 12s, didn't get to see it, but in the offseason, he won senior nationals in a stacked bracket of McKenna, Yaya Thomas, Ironman, Kolodzic, Storr, and okay, I get it, it's freestyle. And I'm the first to always say there's a difference between folk style and freestyle, and I don't always equate it, but I'm just saying, first round match, look out for that. He made significant jumps from last season. I expect him to make more this season. The next, number 4 is Mickey Phillippi. Number 5 seed at 133 pounds. The pit wrestler. who's 8-1 this season. Now, his loss comes to Corbin Myers at 133. His loss comes to Corbin Myers at 133 of Virginia Tech at the ACC Championships. He was 25-1 last season. His lone loss coming to Sammy Alvarez. And listen, the thing about Phillippi and Myers is they're ACC wrestlers. They wrestle a lot. And oftentimes you'll see when wrestlers wrestle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 matches, the score gets closer and closer and closer. Then you start getting some back and forth on exactly what's going on there. And Phillippi's 3-2 against him, but they wrestled so often. The reason that I'm really looking forward to Mickey Phillippi here is that in 2019, 2 seasons ago, he was the lone college wrestler to have a regular season victory over Dayton Fix. The number 1 seed, Dayton Fix, that's right. Who's not in his conference, who's a Big 12 wrestler of Okie State, is Dayton Fix. He actually, if you get this, he actually took him down in regulation and ended up
really makes the opponent work extremely hard.
Now he does have, and so that's why I'm looking out for him. Now obviously Dayton Fix performed better than him at at nationals, but because Phillippi just ended up making the round of 12 that year, but he does have other top 10 good matches, wins and losses in both aspects. He had a loss to RBY 4-3 in 2019 NCAA championships. He never wrestled DeSanto, but I believe they could be meeting in the quarterfinals this year. And if he wins in the quarterfinals, Phillippi will be wrestling Dayton Fix yet again. If I'm Dayton Fix, I'm scared. Well, maybe not. Maybe scared's a little bit too far of a term. If I'm Dayton Fix, I'm maybe a little bit nervous, okay? Maybe looking out for him. Also, his wins over top wrestlers in Jarrett Trombley and Louis Hayes. That's why Mickey Phillippi is a wrestler I'm looking out for. Number 3 is Dom Demas. Dom Demas at 141 of Oklahoma. Just had a great weekend at the Big 12 Championships. I mean, speaking of guys who had great wins at 2019 NCAAs, he beat Nick Lee 13-9, and that was a high-energy, high-pace match that he had there to go to the third and fourth place match. And the third and fourth place match was actually against Jaden Ironman. Now, what happened there? It was actually a very close victory. Ironman ended up riding Dom Demas out and then ended up escaping in the third period. I think he won by a score of like 2-0. It was really very close match. I just rewatched that to see what happened in that match. And listen, I think that both these guys have got better, but look out for that type of matchup. Ironman's only loss that year was to Yanni in the semifinals, interestingly enough. Now, Dom Demas and Ironman could meet up again in the semifinals if he gets out of the tough side with Real Woods, Grant Willits, Tariq Wilson. It's a tough side of the bracket to get to the semifinals against Jaden Ironman, but I'll be watching out for him. He just beat Ian Parker. I mean, just look at this bracket again from the 2019 NCAA championships. That was a tough 141-pound bracket. And number 2, I have 2 wrestlers left in the Fanco 5 here who I would be looking out for as dark horses, tough wrestlers. Noah Adams at 197. Now, like I said, I looked at these beforehand, and I had Noah Adams as a dark horse, as a tough wrestler to watch, but unfortunately he got a tough draw. He did. He got a very tough draw because he has Stephen Buchanan in the second round. He has 3 losses to Buchanan this year alone, and actually he's beaten him in the past, but it just seems like Buchanan has it out for Noah Adams. Now, can he find a way to beat him? Maybe this is his time. Like I just said with Phillippi, like when guys wrestle 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, anything can happen. Now Buchanan has historically this year found a way to get it done, but Noah Adams was an undefeated wrestler. His only loss, and this was the thing, is his only loss was to Buchanan this year. That's his only 3 losses, but his lone loss, right? And because of that, I think that Noah Adams can go with just about anybody else at 197. I wasn't sure how he was going to stack up against guys because he hadn't wrestled anybody crazy tough last year. But with his controlled style of wrestling, I think that he can find a way to get it done. If he wins that match against Buchanan, he's going to have a tough Ferrari or Sloan. Big 12 is just, I think they're like all at the top half of the bracket, which is just blows my mind. It's absolutely ridiculous. But number 1 is Jake Wenzel. Jake Wenzel, the number 3 seed at 165 pounds in one of the toughest brackets in the entire NCAA. Wenzel, that's right. I actually have 2 pit wrestlers here in my dark horse picks, in my underdog threats to watch. And to be honest with you, I almost put in 3 pit wrestlers. I couldn't believe it. And it's not because I'm from Pittsburgh, okay? I'll be the first to say I don't like Pitt. I'm a Penn State guy. And when you're a Penn State guy, you're usually not a Pitt guy, even though I'm from the Whitfield, from Pitt. But I do like to cheer on the wrestlers that are from around where I'm from as well. But let's just look at what exactly happened here, okay? Wenzel, the senior, it may finally be his time. He's been commanding on the mat this season. Let's not forget about his match that he had against Mekhi Lewis, where he
flexibility even more. Are you kidding me? How will this end up?
I mean, he just takes him down.
Above the head, back trip. Wenzel is really going at the national champion here.
But Jake Wenzel is just on fire this season at 165. His only loss is to Thomas Bullard. He's 9-1 so far this season. And I don't know if I said it or not, but Bonacorsi was the other pit wrestler I was going to throw into this underdog mix. I'd be watching out for him. I was listening to Pitt's Beyond the Script, not something I usually listen to, but I saw it on YouTube, and he was talking about how he kind of felt like he was cheated out of that match. Robbed was the word he used, and I get it because he didn't get to wrestle the full match against Mekhi because he injury defaulted out. Now, like I said already, Wenzel won that match, or he was winning that match, but Mekhi ended up injury defaulting out. But the question is, he's going to have a tough matchups with Ninehouse or Robb in the second round. Monday in O'Toole, undefeated guys. Valencia potentially if he makes the semis. Not an easy way out for the number 3 seed, but also how would he do? I mean, he lost by major decision to Valencia in the past. He's beat Ethan Smith, who's a tough wrestler at the weight. I don't know. So those are my underdog picks. I'd love to hear who do you think, who's the biggest underdog going into the NCAA tournament? Drop a name and a weight down in the comments below. And let's get ready to move on to our third topic. But first, the chat is going insane right now, and I love it. John Smith is just on fire right now. He seems like he's matching every little donation, every donation in the comments, and I just am so grateful for these Fanco Wrestling fans. Between GT and Thomas, as well as Chad, Chad is also a channel supporter. I mean, John Smith and Chad, channel supporters. I mean, I'm just eternally grateful for what is going on in the chat right now. I love breaking down these brackets, and I love breaking down what is going on here. If you're interested in helping to support the channel, because seriously, like, I don't know if you just heard recently, but I didn't have a live show last week, and the reason for that, unfortunately, was because my computer, a piece in it went totally corrupt. And luckily I had a backup. Luckily my brother was able to help me get through the tough situation. But, man, it was tough. And of course it was around conference championship time. Of course it was Big 10s and Big 12s. Of course, because why wouldn't it happen? But because of support from channel supporters, I was able to fix my corrupted card in my computer. I mean, this was an expensive fix. And this is even with having somebody my brother who knows about computers, right? But I still had to fix it. And thanks to these super chats, thanks to everything going on in the comments now, thanks to my channel supporters, just unbelievably grateful for everything going on there. And let's get into the next topic. And this is just, I mean, are you enjoying the show? If you're enjoying the show and maybe don't have the funds to support the channel, but just want to watch and love watching, I want to see thumbs ups in the comments down below. Drop a thumbs up that you are loving this video, or any emoji. Maybe you don't want to drop a thumbs up, but any emoji, but I want to see the thumbs up. So there are 40 undefeated wrestlers right now going into the NCAA championships. Can you believe that? 40 undefeated wrestlers? 40. I'm going to break down these stats to you for everything you need to know about these undefeated wrestlers. So I'm going to be breaking it down by the best records, by which conference has the most undefeated wrestlers, which school has the most undefeated wrestlers, and which weight has the most undefeated wrestlers. And at the end of this video, I'm actually going to break down the updated winning streaks. This is something that I haven't seen anywhere else updated, and so I wanted to update it for you. I did the research. I did the tough research today about who has the longest winning streaks, active winning streaks right now in the NCAA, and I'll be dropping that for you. So first of all, let's talk about the best records in the NCAA right now. Brock Muller is 17-0, the MAC champ, with his best win over Abu Lawalin of Okie State, has the best record in the NCAA. And it's impressive that he has such a dominant record, 17 wins, because it's a shortened season. You see a couple of these guys, they may be 5-0, 6-0. Honestly, a lot of these Big Ten guys are like 6 or 7-0, right? But Brock Muller's 17-0. Demetrius Romero, who just got the number 2 seed at his weight, is 16-0. An under-the-radar guy from Utah Valley, won the Big 12s, has wins over Mantanona and Bernie Traw of Cal Poly. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name. I've done research on a couple of these names and just don't exactly know how to pronounce that last name. But he's the number 2 seed at his weight, is Demetrius Romero. David Carr is 15-0, and I'll get into an interesting fact about 157 when it comes to undefeated wrestlers, because there's some very interesting things happening there. 73% bonus point percentage for David Carr, and he's looking for that highly rematch in the semifinals. Keegan O'Toole is 13-0, the young wrestler, the young freshman. Parker Keckeisen, also 13-0, another young guy. Both these guys undefeated so far this season. And then we have a couple guys tied at number 12, or for the number 5 spot at 12-0. Cody Tribus of Navy, Sammy Sasso, Austin Murphy of Campbell, Gable Stevenson of Minnesota, and Colton Schultz, also an undefeated wrestler. Each of these guys is 12-0. One thing to note before we move on to the undefeated freshman wrestlers, which, I find completely impressive. The lowest ranked wrestler, the lowest seeded wrestler right now, who is an undefeated conference champion, who I had to mention as I was doing the stats, the only undefeated conference champion not seeded by Flow Wrestling right now is Chris Cober of Campbell, which I found kind of interesting that for whatever reason, not ranked. Just wanted to throw that out there. I also want to talk about undefeated wrestlers. So, and trust me, I have some very fun tables coming up at you soon. If you're watching live on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you're not seeing the tables, but I'll still be breaking down all the stats for you. Number 2 seed, Sam Latona at 125 is 10-0, and this is a guy that pulls off big wins. You look at his big wins over Jacob Camacho, which happened in the duel. It happened at ACCs. He's a guy that's great under pressure, and we'll see how he does. It's going to be tough to stay undefeated for him in a weight with Spencer Lee, but he's having a great season so far. And could stay undefeated up until the semis. If his only loss this season is to Spencer Lee, you better watch out in the future. I'm just saying. 2 Mizzou wrestlers, freshmen, also undefeated. Keegan O'Toole, who I already mentioned, the true freshman, who his wins haven't come from anybody ranked, but he is a MAC champ, and he is at 165, which I've said is the toughest weight. Rocky Elam, also at 197, is 11-0. I've mentioned Parker Keckeisen already, the other undefeated freshman wrestler of Northern Iowa at 184 pounds, Big 12 champion. Jarrett Lane is in EIWA, 8-0. Some other freshmen that I want to mention, Jarrett Lane of EIWA. Ben Pasiuk of Army. Another name, I'm sorry, I tried finding the pronunciation for it. Pasiuk, I believe, is the way to pronounce it. 5-0. And Colton Schultz of Arizona State, 12-0 this season. So great work by the freshmen. How many freshmen do you think will stay undefeated at the end of the year? I mean, there is an undefeated guy at every single weight. So there's a possibility that we get 10 undefeated NCAA champions. I think that a couple years ago, those came into, we actually had 10 undefeated seeds come into the NCAA championships, and only a couple remained. There's always upsets. There are always upsets. The most by conference, you're probably not surprised by this, Big Ten. All their number 1 seeds, all the guys who won Big Tens are undefeated. They have the most. Next, EIWA has 7 undefeated wrestlers, and there's been a lot going on about the EIWA. You know, the thing about it is people are upset because they had the most the most seeds, the most at-large bids, the most automatic qualifiers, for the NCAA championships, even though they didn't have a lot of the Ivy League schools, but they still have 7 undefeated wrestlers. It's still a tough conference this year. MAC and ACC each had 6. The Pac-12 has 5 undefeated wrestlers. Big 12 has 4, and 2 from the SoCon, both from the same school of Campbell University. And the most by any school is actually Iowa. Now you have Spencer Lee, who's 7-0, Jaden Ironman 8-0, Alex Marinelli 5-0. Like I said, they don't have the crazy 17-0 records like Brock Muller. Maybe in another year, yeah, but not this year. And Michael Kemmer, who is 7-0. Each of these guys is in the number 1 seed for the Iowa Hawkeyes at the NCAA championships. They're all seniors, and they're all going to get their shots. A lot of them got their shots at the potential number 2s at the Big Ten championships. So, kind of tough. The most impressive to me out of those guys is Jaden Ironman, who beat Nick Lee in the Big Ten championships. Michael Kemmer, who beat Massa and then Srirachi at Big Tens. Most impressive there. The other school I wanted to talk about is who actually has a few undefeated wrestlers. 4 undefeated wrestlers in Colton Schultz at heavyweight, who I mentioned. Brandon Courtney, who is 11-0. Anthony Valencia, who is 10-0. And Cordell Norfleet, who is undefeated at 9-0. And Valencia is probably the most impressive here because at the Pac-12s, he majored Shane Griffith, who was another undefeated wrestler, who had one of the highest records in winning streaks going into here, but it's not the longest remaining. I'll get into that in a second. NC State and Mizzou each have 3 undefeated wrestlers for them. Are you a fan of these stats? You know, I spend my time looking at a lot of these stats, looking at spreadsheets. I'm a spreadsheet guy. Love looking at all the different possibilities. You should see my NCAA list and the algorithm that I have going on for the points there. It's awesome. But the most by weight, and then I'll get into the winning streaks. So the most by weight, did you know? It's 125 and 157. 125 is Spencer Lee, Drew Hildebrandt, Brandon Courtney, Jarrett Lane, and Sam Latona, each undefeated at their weight. The next is 157, whose top 4 seeds are all undefeated. Ryan Deacon, Hayden Hiley, David Carr, and De La Vecchia are all undefeated. 1, 2, 3, 4 undefeated wrestlers. I would love to see all those semis happen. All seniors, actually, except for David Carr. And interestingly enough, each of these guys are in the nation's longest winning streaks currently active. So what are the longest winning streaks? Now, the first guy here on the list is actually not even wrestling in college this year. The rest of them are, but not the number 1 guy, who is Yanni Diakomahalis. Yanni Diakomahalis has 47 straight wins. Has almost going to crack 50. Wish that he could this year. 50 straight wins. But number 2, who just overpassed in the last month, is Brock Muller. Brock Muller has 33 straight wins, who overtook Spencer Lee's 30 straight wins. After that, Gable Stevenson, 29. David Carr at 28. And this is the crazy part that I was talking about with these guys. David Carr, 28. Ryan Deacon, 27. And Hayden Hidley, 25 straight wins. After that, Pat Glory, also not wrestling this season, of Princeton, at 24 straight wins. Matt Stencil, 23. And tied for 10th for the longest winning streaks currently active are Austin O'Connor with 22 and Drew Hildebrandt with 22. So a couple of Central Michigan guys there in that bottom half. Kind of cool to see that happen. How many of these guys, my question for you is, how many of these guys will stay undefeated after the NCAA championship? Maybe we'll do another look at the active win streaks after the championships end. And I see that the chat is still going wild. I love to see everything going on in the chat. Do this live show every single Wednesday night. Did it a little bit later this time, usually around 7:15. Drops on Apple Podcasts as soon as I get the chance to upload it. But the chat's going awesome again with James Gaffney, 100% awesome donation. Chad, I mean, extremely grateful for you giving as well. Chad saying that Norfleet will win 197 pounds, and I don't know if I don't disagree. I think that Norfleet definitely has a shot to win 197 pounds. John Smith just continuously helping, and I want to say, thanks to Guillermo Moreno, Ryan Doyle, Jason Brantley, who's a channel member right here, channel supporter, has been supporting this channel for over 2 months now. Gregory DeRosa, and every single other person in the comments right now. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for this season. The Fanco Wrestling Show has been growing. The Fanco Wrestling channel has been growing off the charts. It's been going absurd thanks to the support from you. So one last request from you tonight. If you loved this show tonight, drop another emoji. I want to see you drop that punch emoji or smiley face emoji, either of those, showing that you are just so excited about this show tonight. Thank you all for tuning in to the Fanco Wrestling Show. Cannot wait to talk with you about the NCAAs on the next live show. But my name's Josiah, and this is the Fanco Wrestling Show.